Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee. It's funny. I'm sitting here waiting for the live stream to go live. I'm like, why isn't it going live? It's because I didn't push the go live button. So, uh, hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk about a really interesting case study that Katja Walsh and I are including in our book. And we didn't want to wait for the book to come out to share the case study. So I am not going to disclose who this is, but it's a really interesting case study about how this organization, a very large global organization, rolled out AI, generative AI, in their organization. So I am excited to share that with you today. What I would love for you to share is, of course, say where you're coming from. Would love to be able to shout you out and say hello, and share how you have rolled out generative AI or are currently rolling out generative AI to your organization. What was the approach? What was the logic? How did you go about doing it? Just provide a few details, because I think that would be super helpful for people to hear. And if you can share, what were some of your challenges, and what were some of your successes? Again, some best practices, ways that you overcame these barriers to roll out and adoption is what we're going to be talking about today. So let me get into the slides. Let's see, where are they? The wrong slides to show. I was going through them. So I'm going to talk about what I call this the fast, fun, and maybe not so furious, but fearless way of how AI took off without red tape. And I think, again, so many organizations are rolling out AI as if it was an enterprise technology. And it's very different. It is constantly changing. It is again, as we saw this past weekend with the rollout of DeepSeek, a new generative AI engine from China. It is, again, things are changing so quickly that they were able to develop this. I'm just going to close this for a second and talk about DeepSeek for a second. If you haven't used it, go and give it a try. Again, I just use it through the web interface. I haven't downloaded it because for better or for worse, it's from China, and I don't know what they're going to use my data for. So I don't have it on my phone yet. I'm just using it through the web interface and testing it side by side with OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, also tested with Gemini. It's really good. And the amazing thing is they did it for about $6 million, and they've been at it for about 2 years. And they basically took a bunch of small models, used not the latest generation of NVIDIA's chips, and so it's not as powerful. But what they were able to do in a very short amount of time with not the greatest chips, just was a shot across the bow across the entire industry to rethink, how do you build these models? So it's been really interesting to see that happening. NVIDIA's stock was down 17%. I haven't checked it this morning to see what was up. It was probably a good buying opportunity. My belief is that this is just going to be another way for people to innovate. And it, again, is a testament to the fact that you can do so much with so little with this technology, and that it is far from over in terms of what is possible. So I am excited to share with you today how things are happening. And I will also be sharing these slides. Thank you, Jay, for posting them up, because I still can't post to LinkedIn for whatever reason. And let's see. Let me just post it into the other channel so you can see them. All right, back to my slides. So the challenges, as I was mentioning, is that a lot of generative AI rollouts just don't take off, because they're oftentimes this sort of top-down mandate. And the people are saying, okay, how do we do this? It's coming slowly from on top. There are very rigid ROI requirements, because the perception is this is going to be very expensive. It's hard to roll out. I know some organizations early on rolled out Microsoft's Copilot to everyone in the organization. And that's very expensive to do when you're paying $30, $40 a person across an entire enterprise. So it's very difficult to justify a strong ROI around that. And you're going to be very careful. Again, this is a lot of overhead. It involves a lot of steering committees as a result. You have to mandate and understand the use cases. And there's a lot of also risk involved. So there's a lot of training, restrictive policies to mitigate the risk. And this is basically involves months of planning and millions of dollars and a lot of overhead. And in the meantime, your people don't have access to these tools. So this is what I've seen typically inside of rollouts, that they give a few people access, or they give no access, or they give people access to a free tools, and lock down what they can do with that. Again, with lots of training, because you're afraid of what people are going to do. So this is not the way to quick generative AI adoption and innovation across an organization. So this is the challenge, and I'm going to go into a case study of how an organization addressed all of these challenges. And so I think it's really interesting to be able to see what this one organization did. So let me just share with you what they did. So this is a large global professional services firm with 65,000 employees. And their philosophy was build it and they will come. And they wanted to keep it as low cost as possible, roll out the tools very quickly, and just let employees explore. In my interview with the CIO, Katya and I was talking to him, and he said, if they use it, great. If they didn't use it, fine. I don't care. So, but for the people who wanted to use it and access it, we wanted to give them a safe, secure way that was compliant, didn't put our client data at risk, made sure that everybody understood, and keep it as low cost as possible, keep the overhead off so that it could be adopted quickly and broadly, and we'll see where innovation comes up. And so they really try to prioritize a sense of experimentation over this, instead of really putting a huge amount of governance over it. And they didn't want to have cumbersome approvals. Again, if you can use it, great. And they put in lots of safeguards to make it all happen. And what they did is they just put a simple chat interface over an open AI API, working with Microsoft in a secure environment. They use very small teams. They use existing internal capabilities to, again, keep the costs really low. And when the costs were really low and the risk was removed, it didn't matter what the ROI was. There was no business case. And this is the most interesting thing. As adoption spread, the CIO said, we didn't have to measure value. We can't really measure the value, but I measure the value that, in that if I were to take it away, everybody would be complaining. So not necessarily clear ROI, but we know that value is being created. And because the cost is so low, we don't care. So I think we thought this was a really interesting approach. And the whole idea is to keep the cost so low, increase exposure, increase the adoption rate, make it easy for people to pick it up and innovate. And then the ability for each group, each department, each business unit to figure out how to use these tools was the best approach. And so, while I still will advocate absolutely that you need a strategy to build out really strong capabilities, have a path for transformation, I think this is a really interesting way to just get the organization up and going. You're creating then this flywheel of experimentation, adoption, innovation that then you can codify into this strategy. But you need to get the flywheel going. So let me go and talk a little bit more about how they actually did this. First of all, they did not block access to free tools like ChatGPT 3.5. And when the people went to that particular site, again, through the web browser on their computers within the confines of the organization, they received a pop-up notice that said, these are the best practices, these are the security risks, and these are prohibited actions. So like, don't upload private data. And they blocked access. Again, people would have to pay and do other things if they wanted to get more access to more powerful models. So what they did instead, and they built on top of the OpenAI tool. And the CIO said, I'm just going to build this. So he personally went in and built a chat interface on top of the API to make it accessible, because that's all ChatGPT is. It's just a consumer interface to the underlying models. And so they built their own interface and then worked very closely with security and risk to make sure that this instance of their personal, their enterprise version of OpenAI had all the security requirements. And therefore, it limited the risk of employees using external tools and unsecured AI tools, and instead steered people towards using their open AI API, their customized tool. And it's pretty easy to do this. Again, a CIO on top of his regular phase was just building this chat interface. So it is pretty straightforward to do these things if you have a technical knowledge. The tools are available to do this. Microsoft supports it. They built it on top of the Microsoft platform so that it was secure. And what I really like about this is that they gave employees an alternative to really powerful tools. And so, therefore, as this chat interface was rolled out, their internal AI tools was turned out. If people try to go to one of the publicly available tools, it would just steer them over. Like, don't use this. Use our secure platform instead. And it was just as good as using the publicly available tools. Now, the reason I want to emphasize this is that they didn't want to ban the use of AI. They wanted to encourage it, and they had to make sure it was secure. Again, they were working with highly confidential information from clients. They wanted to make sure that data wasn't captured and being shared in these external tools. And yet they wanted to be able to make sure that people had access to these tools, because if they didn't, they would use them without that oversight. So they said, we can't beat them, we're going to join them. We're going to make sure that people have access to the most powerful tools available using these APIs. So let's see. The things that they did, let me just give you some more examples. And again, URLs here, you can use the QR code to get to it too as well. So the first thing they had to do was to secure the generative AI tool. The first thing they did was to make sure they worked very closely with the security team. So the CIO built that interface, then took it to security, like how do we make sure this works and is secure? And this was really key. They made absolutely no assumption that there could be any type of safe data entry uh, because they couldn't control what employees would enter. And so that assumption was really important. So they made sure that any information that was put into the tool was built to handle the worst case scenarios. So you can do all the training you want, you can do all the oversight. In the end, employees are going to do what they're going to do. So they made sure there was no unauthorized data logging. There was no way that data could actually be logged and put in there. Anything that appeared in there was going to be out of the system within an hour. There was no risk of exposing any sort of internal or confidential information because it stayed inside their system. They would do the calls to the API, come back in, and none of the data would ever leave. And they had full control over how that information was being transmitted and processed, because again, it was on their particular instance. I believe it was AWS that they were using. And so it never went back out. And again, being able to secure their use of these AI tools was absolutely essential. And while they initially built with OpenAI, they could also now, depending on the particular task and the requirements, go and use any other tool depending on the application they needed. So again, gives you tremendous flexibility. I have talked about the ability, the importance of building flexibility in previous live streams and articles on LinkedIn. You can go and see them. But I think it's so important to have that flexibility, but you got to start someplace. So the OpenAI API into GPTs is a really good way to start. So one of the things they did after that was to make sure there was some training. It's a very small, light training that if you wanted to access this tool for the first time, you would get a very short training module. You had to take a quiz, pass it, and then you could get access to it. They launched an internal AI academy to encourage employees to learn all the different things. They could get badges and achievements. They even made it super fun and interesting. The CIO was explaining that they use these little, they gave the tool a name, a persona, they created a little cartoon character for it, and they made plushies up to go around the different offices and just have training. And they had this AI plushie kind of sitting there to make it fun. And the other really interesting thing they did was they expanded the technical team. I'll talk a little bit how they did that. But as the adoption scaled, they found that there were certain things that people were doing over and over again that they kept coming back to the team and asking for. So for example, people would say, I want to be able to look at the structured data with just natural language. So they built a tool to do that, to scale that application. People wanted to have chatbots to sit on top of like travel requests or HR questions. So this chatbot could sit on top of any document database, library. They would vectorize the library so it could be searched. And then voila, you had a chatbot to access whatever it is that you wanted employees to be able to access. And then they also did some really good data extraction tools so that if you had some documents, you want to pull information out of that, it would do it for you without having to do a lot of manual keying. So those are just a couple of the AI applications that the team built on top of this AI tool to be able to scale operations again. And this is something I really want to emphasize is that a chatbot alone is going to create a lot of value. But as people start using this, they realize, oh, I want to do more with it. And as the requests kept coming in, the team was able to be very responsive and build these tools very quickly and roll them out. And what I really liked was how systematic they were able to do this with a very small team. So what they did is they built this tool again. The CIO built the chatbot, and then they used their existing team in one office to be able to just build these tools. They were lucky that they had a couple people in their IT department who were familiar with how to build these tools and worked with security to build the initial tool. Again, I think it was like 2 or 3 people inside the organization who could do this. They also, it was really interesting, didn't have a formal business steering committee. Again, they were just rolling out a tool. They did this inside the purview of the CIO's office. Again, didn't need a lot of money, so he just took some money that was already in his budget and applied it to this. And they also worked as the adoption grew with all of the business units inside the company and worked directly with the CIOs to figure out how to use this API and their business operations to figure out again these applications they wanted to build so that the adoption and the scaling of the adoption matched whatever business needs they had. And eventually the staff is currently about 20 people to build all of these AI applications. And it's staffed mostly with early career hires. Again, they had typically the tools and the skills to be able to build these AI tools. This is not high computing data science that we're talking about. It is literally building AI applications to scale, again, these repeated uses of generative AI inside the business units. So I emphasize this because for a 65,000 person organization, they were able to build this very quickly and very cheaply. Again, using internal teams. And as the adoption scaled, as innovation kept happening, they were able to bring in more and more people and either train people or hire people early in their careers, again, who are not that expensive to be able to scale their operations. So a couple of the things that they did as a result is just this. They had in the first year 25 million API calls, and the cost was about $300,000 a year. Again, pennies if you think about the value that's being created. And what was even more impressive is that because everything was on the secure platform, they were able to launch these AI apps, create them, develop them, test them, and then deploy them into the organization in about 20 minutes. Again, because all of the encryption, authentication, any of the compliance controls that they had as a requirement were already built into the platform. And I can't emphasize how important that is. That if you want to scale your use of AI, you need to have these fundamentals locked down. And by doing this right from the very beginning, to enable a fast start, to be able to be responsive to business requests, to say, hey, I could use this tool. Yeah, we can build it, test it, and then deploy it. And that is what allowed this organization to do this. Again, there were over 300 applications and requests for, again, these custom AI tools, not 300 requests to use AI for different use cases. These are 300 requests to actually build tools inside the organization that allow people to scale and make use of AI for a particular business case. So let me just put out the things again here. Again, if you have any questions around this, we have a little bit of time left. I know I went super quick into this, but please put them into comments if you have any questions at all. I'm going to see what we have here. Okay, here, Lynn has a great comment. I applaud use of AI inside organizations as a top priority rather than aimed at customer interactions. Thanks for a great practical case study. Speed was impressive. Yes, agreed. It's interesting, Lynn, that again, prioritizing this fast adoption inside the organization was a very fast way to do this. I last year I had the chief digital officer of AARP, Sammy Hassanai, to come on and talk about how they rolled it out. And their strategy was very similar. They made the tool readily available. Anybody who wanted to use, again, this was very early on, just said, hey, I want to use it. They just filled out a form and they would get approval. They have since done away with that and given a lot more broader use. But the internal focus on operations, productivity, just reduced the sort of angst around how we're going to use this for external. Interestingly, this company did not put any restrictions on what you were going to use AI for. Again, a lot of the training said that if you are going to create content, use this for external communications, make sure you review it before you send it out because it can make mistakes. And that was the only oversight that they had. And so, again, it relied on people's good judgment and critical thinking. Um, it doesn't take a lot to understand this is the requirement. It has to be reviewed by somebody. It's a pretty light oversight, but it's also a very logical and usable one. And anybody with common sense would be doing that. So in the end, again, it's like if you're going to take information from an early career person in marketing or customer service, you're going to review it before it's sent out. Same thing with AI. So the interesting thing about this organization was the focus on rolling it out as quickly and uh, as as low barrier free to the employees to make sure that people understood how to use this. All right, let's see. Joe just says hello. Thank you very much for joining. I'm glad you enjoyed the information about DeepSeek. Again, I think DeepSeek is one of the most fascinating things because it throws this little bomb right into everything that we're thinking about. How AI is kind of like, oh yeah, we know how it's going to develop, and then boof, you can create your own large learning model. I think one of the things to keep in mind again that you want to remain as agile as possible because you have no idea what new technologies are going to come around. We've sort of accepted as fact that you couldn't build your own large learning model. And frankly, I don't think it's something that people should be doing anyways in most organizations, building your own model. You're much better off using existing models, picking the ones that you wanted to use and applying it to a very specific instance and problem that you have inside of your organization. And the more strategic the problem, the more value that you're going to create in your organization too as well. All right, I'm just checking to see if there are any last questions or comments. All right, good. I'm seeing people just saying, yeah, this is great. This is super helpful. All right, I'm going to close up here and just talk about what I'll be talking about next week. Last week, I talked a little bit about innovation and belonging and inclusion. And I'm going to just continue that because I was just at a startup event in San Diego last night talking about how to increase innovation with belonging, but also talking about how do you grow an organization? How do you think about your leadership potential? And how to use, in particular, tools like AI to increase the ability for people to show their full potential, to ensure that there is a fair meritocracy in your organization, so that the leadership pipeline is filled with the most capable people that you have. I emphasize to these startups who are just thinking about this that, yeah, they're struggling for product market fit and so many other things, that thinking about culture and thinking about how do you set up your organization for as much innovation to increase the level that you can recruit the best people and keep the best people, and to ensure that there is a meritocracy, you have to think about inclusion and belonging right from the very beginning. And for organizations that are in the middle of this, how do you make sure that this is happening across the board so that the best people are showing up and being promoted to realize the fullest potential of your workforce to achieve your common purpose and mission? So I'm excited to go back and talk about that, especially given some of the things that I learned. All right, I want to see if there's any other things here. Jay has this point that model distillation is a key capability. Absolutely. Being able to look at these models, figure out which ones are the right ones to use, and understand them is really key. Jay, thank you again for posting. Great. I thank you for joining again. Have a great week. And Natalie is looking forward to the topic next week. Thank you so much. And Mr. Wondrous is saying, great. Thank you for joining today, Mr. Wondrous. I like that username. All right. That's what I have for today. And again, good luck with this. Go and play and use DeepSeek. Curious to see what you've learned, what you experienced. I have to say, it is pretty darn impressive. Again, I'm constantly testing these models to see what they're good at, what they're not good at. I encourage you to stay on top of things. Don't assume that things are staying the same. It is constantly changing. So get out there, experiment, stay safe, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.